The brass casing hit the concrete floor with a sharp ping, still smoking from the barrel of Martha Henley's .357 Magnum. 73 years old, arthritis in her knuckles, and wearing a floral print dress that belonged in a church pew rather than a shooting range. But there she stood, calm as morning coffee, while a perfectly split quarter spun through the air behind her, each half catching the fluorescent lights as it fell. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The laughter had died. The whispers had stopped. Even the cocky young man who'd been placing bets against her just moments before stood frozen, his mouth hanging open like a broken gate. Martha set her revolver down on the counter with the same gentle care she'd used for her grandmother's china, then turned to face the crowd that had gathered to watch what they assumed would be an embarrassing spectacle. Her gray eyes held no triumph, no smugness, just the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd spent a lifetime proving that assumptions could be deadlier than bullets. But how did a woman who looked like she should be home knitting sweaters end up splitting coins at Riverside shooting range? The answer begins 3 weeks earlier, on a Tuesday morning that started like any other, when Martha's world shifted in ways she never could have imagined. Martha Henley had lived in Millbrook, Pennsylvania, for 52 years, ever since she'd married Robert Henley fresh out of high school. Their small colonial house on Maple Street had witnessed 5 decades of ordinary life: birthday parties, holiday dinners, quiet evenings on the porch swing. Robert had passed 4 years ago, leaving Martha with his pension, their savings, and a house that seemed to grow larger and lonelier with each passing day. At 73, Martha had settled into the rhythm of widowhood. Tuesday mornings meant grocery shopping at Henderson's Market, where she'd buy the same items: whole wheat, bread, low-fat milk, chicken breasts, and whatever vegetables were on sale. She'd nod politely to the cashier, exchange pleasantries about the weather, and drive home in her 2018 Honda Civic, the last car Robert had picked out before his heart attack. This particular Tuesday felt different from the moment she stepped out of her front door. The October air carried an unusual chill, and the maple tree in her front yard had dropped its leaves overnight, creating a golden carpet that crunched under her sensible black shoes. She'd lived through enough autumns to know that sudden changes in weather often preceded sudden changes in everything else. Henderson's Market buzzed with its usual morning crowd: young mothers pushing strollers, construction workers grabbing coffee and donuts, retirees like herself moving through the aisles with careful deliberation. Martha had just selected a package of ground turkey when she heard the commotion near the front of the store. "Give me everything in the register now." The voice cracked with nervous energy, young and desperate. Martha peered around the end cap of canned goods to see a thin teenager, maybe 17, holding what looked like a small black pistol. His hands shook as he pointed it at Diane Morrison, the head cashier who'd worked at Henderson's for 23 years. The other customers had either frozen in place or were slowly backing toward the rear of the store. Martha found herself doing neither. Instead, she moved closer, her mind cataloging details with a clarity that surprised her. The boy's sneakers were worn through at the heels. His jeans hung loose, suggesting recent weight loss. The gun trembled in his grip, not the steady hold of someone comfortable with firearms, but the uncertain grasp of someone who'd never fired a weapon in his life. "Please," Diane was saying, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "Just take whatever you need. Nobody has to get hurt." The teenager's eyes darted around the store, landing briefly on Martha before moving on. He seemed to be looking for exits, for threats, for anything that might complicate his desperate plan. What he found instead was a store full of people who looked more concerned than afraid, people who recognized desperation when they saw it. "I don't want to hurt anybody," he said, and Martha believed him. The gun wavered in his hands as if it weighed 50 pounds instead of 2. "I just need the money." My mom's medicine costs $300 and insurance won't cover it anymore. Martha stepped forward, ignoring the sharp intake of breath from another customer behind her. What's your name, son? The teenager's head snapped toward her, confusion replacing some of the panic in his eyes. What? Your name. I'm Martha Henley. I live over on Maple Street. She kept her voice conversational, the same tone she'd used to ask about the weather. You look familiar. Do you go to Millbrook High? Yeah, I graduated last year. I'm Tyler Garrison. The gun lowered slightly, though he didn't seem to realize it. Tyler Garrison, Martha repeated, as if testing the name. Your mother. Wouldn't happen to be Linda Garrison, would she? Works at the diner on Route 15? Tyler's face crumpled. She's sick. I'm really sick. And we can't afford her medications anymore. The insurance company dropped us last month because of some paperwork, and now they want cash up front for everything. Martha nodded slowly. She'd heard similar stories from other people in town, medical expenses that bankrupted families, insurance companies that found creative ways to deny coverage, prescription drugs that cost more than some people's rent. It was a problem that touched everyone, directly or indirectly. Tyler, I want you to put that gun down on the counter, she said gently. Nobody's going to call the police. We're going to figure this out together. I can't go to jail, Tyler sighed, tears streaming down his face. If I go to jail, my mom will die. She's only got me. You're not going to jail, Martha said with a certainty that surprised even her. But you are going to put that gun down before someone gets hurt, including you. Tyler looked at the weapon in his hands as if seeing it for the first time. Slowly, carefully, he placed it on the checkout counter. Diane immediately stepped back, her own relief visible in the way her shoulders sagged. Is it loaded? Martha asked. Tyler shook his head. I don't even know how to load it. I found it in my dad's old stuff after he died. I thought maybe if I just scared somebody, ... Martha picked up the gun, and several people in the store gasped. She examined it with the same attention she'd give to a questionable piece of fruit, turning it over in her hands, checking the cylinder, testing the trigger mechanism. After a moment, she looked up at Tyler. This is a .38 special, she said. Matter-of-factly. Good gun, reliable, but whoever owned it before didn't take very good care of it. The firing pin been filed down, probably to prevent accidental discharge. Even if you had bullets, this wouldn't fire. The store fell silent. Tyler stared at her, his mouth working soundlessly. Finally, he managed to speak. How do you know about guns? Martha set the revolver back on the counter, her expression thoughtful. That's a long story. But right now, we need to focus on your mother's medicine. $300, you said. Tyler nodded mutely. Martha opened her purse and pulled out her checkbook. She wrote quickly, tore off the check and handed it to Tyler. Take this to the pharmacy. Tell them it's for Linda Garrison's prescriptions. Tyler looked at the check, his eyes widening. I can't take this. You don't even know me. I know enough, Martha said. I know you love your mother. I know you're desperate and scared. I know you're not a criminal. You're a young man who ran out of options. And I know that sometimes when people are drowning, they need someone to throw them a rope. Tyler's hands shook as he took the check. I'll pay you back. I swear I'll pay you back. You will, Martha agreed. But not with money. You're going to come by my house this weekend, and we're going to talk. About your mother, about your future, and about better ways to solve problems than waving around broken guns. After Tyler left, after the police were called and decided not to press charges, after the store manager thanked Martha for her quick thinking, she found herself sitting in her car in the parking lot, staring at her hands. They were steadier than they'd been in months. For the first time since Robert's death, she felt like herself again. But there was something else. Something she hadn't felt in 4 years, the familiar weight of responsibility. Tyler would be back on Saturday, and she'd need to be ready for him. Ready to help him find a job, ready to talk about his mother's medical bills, ready to discuss the kind of future a 19-year-old high school graduate could build in a town. Like ILLBROK, that she also needed to be ready to explain how a 73-year-old widow knew so much about firearms, a conversation she'd been avoiding for 4 years. Ever since Robert's funeral, when she'd made the decision to lock away that part of her life forever, Martha started her car and drove home, her mind already working through the logistics. She'd need to make some phone calls, dust off some old contacts, and probably visit a place she'd sworn she'd never set foot in again. But first, she had to go up to the attic and retrieve something she'd hidden away in 2019. Something Robert had begged her to get rid of, but she'd never quite been able to part with. The gun safe was exactly where she'd left it, tucked behind Christmas decorations and boxes of Robert's old clothes. The combination was Robert's birthday, a date she'd never forget, no matter how much time passed. The safe opened with a quiet click, revealing its contents: 3 handguns, a rifle, and a small leather journal that chronicled 23 years of competitive shooting. Martha lifted out the .357 Magnum, checking its condition with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this thousands of times before. The weapon felt familiar in her hands, like shaking hands with an old friend after a long absence. She'd won 12 state championships with this gun, placed 3rd in nationals twice, and earned more trophies than she had shelf space for. But that was before she'd met Robert, before she'd chosen love over competition, before she'd traded shooting ranges for dinner parties and target practice for bridge club. She'd been Martha Pemberton then, known throughout the northeastern shooting circuit as one of the most naturally gifted marksmen anyone had ever seen. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Now she was Martha Henley, widow and grandmother figure to a desperate teenager who needed her help. The question was whether Martha Pemberton still existed somewhere inside her, and whether she'd be able to find her way back to the range after 23 years away. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that made Millbrook look like a faded photograph. Martha had spent the previous 3 days making phone calls, researching Tyler's situation, and preparing for conversations she'd never imagined having. She'd also spent considerable time in her basement, cleaning and maintaining firearms she hadn't touched in years. Tyler arrived at exactly 10 o'clock as promised. He looked better, cleaner, more rested, the wild desperation replaced by something closer to hope. He'd brought flowers from the grocery store, cheap but thoughtful, and he stood on her front porch like a job applicant waiting for an interview. "Come in," Martha said, leading into the kitchen where she'd prepared coffee and homemade blueberry muffins. "How's your mother?" "Better," Tyler said, settling into a chair at her small dining table. "The medicine's helping. She actually got out of bed yesterday for the first time in 2 weeks." He paused, looking down at his hands. "I still can't believe you did that." "A complete stranger." "Not a stranger," Martha corrected. "A neighbor. There's a difference." They spent the next hour talking about practical things: Tyler's job search, his mother's prognosis, the medical bills that continued to pile up despite Martha's check. Tyler had been working part-time at a gas station, but the hours were inconsistent and the pay barely covered their rent. He'd applied to several places in town but hadn't heard back from any of them. "What did you want to do after high school?" Martha asked. "Before your mother got sick, what were your plans?" Tyler's face brightened slightly. "I wanted to join the military, Army specifically. I had a recruiter who said I'd be a good fit for their marksmanship program." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Ironic, considering what happened at the store. Why didn't you enlist?" "Mom got diagnosed right after graduation. Stage 3 lung cancer. She never smoked a day in her life, but she worked in that asbestos factory for 15 years before. They shut it down." By the time the symptoms showed up, it was too late for surgery. Martha nodded slowly. The old factory had been a source of employment for half the town before environmental regulations forced its closure. The lawsuits were still working their way through the courts, but legal victories wouldn't help Linda Garrison now. The military's still an option, Martha said. They have delayed entry programs for situations like this. You could enlist but defer your start date until your mother's situation stabilizes. Tyler's eyes lit up. Really? I didn't know that was possible. There are a lot of options you probably don't know about, Martha said gently. But first, we need to talk about Tuesday morning. About what you knew about guns before you walked into that store. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. I told you, I don't know anything about guns. I just found that one in my dad's stuff and thought, maybe I could scare somebody into giving me money. Tyler, you called it a .38 special when you picked it up. Most people would have called it a pistol or a revolver. You knew the specific model. Tyler's face reddened. My dad used to take me shooting sometimes, before he died. Just cans and bottles in the woods behind our house. He said every man should know how to handle a firearm safely. Were you any good at it? I guess. Dad said I had a natural eye for it, but we only went a few times before he got sick. Martha leaned back in her chair, studying Tyler's face. What? If I told you there was a way to use that natural talent to help your mother? A way that didn't involve holding up grocery stores? What do you mean? Martha stood and walked to the window, looking out at the gray morning. There's a shooting range about 20 minutes from here. Riverside Shooting Range. They have competitions every weekend, small ones, mostly locals, but the prize money can be decent. $50 for weekend tournaments, $200 for monthly events. Tyler frowned. I don't have money for entry fees or ammunition or anything like that. I do, Martha said simply. I could sponsor you. Cover your expenses. In exchange for a percentage of your winnings. Think of it as an investment in your future. Why would you do that? Martha turned back to face him. Because 23 years ago, I was one of the best competitive shooters in the state. I know talent when I see it, and I know how to develop it. More importantly, I know how to help someone who's drowning. Tyler stared at her, his coffee grown cold in his hands. You were a competitive shooter? I was Martha Pemberton then. I won 12 state championships, placed in nationals twice, and earned more prize money than most people made in a year. She paused. Then I met Robert, and I chose a different life. A good life, but a different one. What happened to Martha Pemberton? Martha smiled, and for the first time in 4 years, it felt completely genuine. I think it's time to find out. The conversation that followed lasted until well past noon. Martha explained the world of competitive shooting, the different disciplines, the equipment requirements, the training regimens that separated weekend enthusiasts from serious competitors. Tyler listened with growing excitement, asking questions that revealed both his ignorance and his instincts. By the time he left, they had a plan. Starting Monday, Tyler would come to Martha's house every afternoon for training. She'd teach him proper stance, breathing techniques, sight alignment, trigger control, all the fundamentals that separated accurate shooting from random luck. On weekends, they'd go to Riverside Shooting Range, where Tyler would compete in beginner level tournaments while Martha reacquainted herself with the community she'd left behind. The goal was simple. Develop Tyler's natural talent into competition-level skill, earn enough prize money to help with his mother's medical expenses, and give him the confidence and credentials he'd need to pursue a military career once his family situation stabilized. What Martha didn't tell Tyler was that returning to competitive shooting meant facing people who remembered. Martha Pemberton, people who'd wonder where she'd been for the past 23 years and why she'd abandoned a sport she'd dominated. It meant confronting a part of herself she'd buried when she'd chosen love over competition, domestic life over the adrenaline rush of perfect shots and tournament victories, Most importantly, it meant returning to Riverside Shooting Range where she'd last competed in 2001, where she'd won her final state championship, and where she'd met the man who'd convinced her to walk away from it all. But that was a story for another day. Right now, she had a teenager to train and a promise to keep. Monday afternoon brought unseasonably warm weather to Millbrook, the kind of Indian summer day that made people forget winter was just around the corner. Martha had spent the morning transforming her basement into a makeshift training facility, moving Robert's old workbench to create space for dry fire practice, and setting up a small target board against the far wall. Tyler arrived at 3 o'clock sharp, wearing jeans and a t-shirt that had seen better days, but his eyes held a focus that hadn't been there during their first meeting. He'd spent the weekend researching competitive shooting online, filling notebook pages with questions about equipment, techniques, and tournament structures. "Before we touch a single firearm," Martha began, leading him down to the basement, "we need to talk about safety. Robert always said that the most dangerous person on any range is the one who thinks they know more than they actually do." She spent the next hour drilling him on the fundamental rules. Treat every firearm as if it were loaded. Never point the muzzle at anything you're not willing to destroy. Keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot, and be absolutely certain of your target and what lies beyond it. Tyler absorbed the information like a sponge, asking clarifying questions that demonstrated he was taking the responsibility seriously. "My dad taught me some of this," he said, handling the unloaded .357 with careful precision, "but not like this. He was more about just having fun in the woods." "Fun has its place," Martha agreed, "but what we're doing here is different. This is about developing muscle memory so precise that you can perform under pressure. When you're standing at a tournament line with 50 people watching and prize money on the line, you don't have time to think about fundamentals. They have to be automatic." The dry fire practice began with Tyler holding the revolver in what he thought was a proper shooting stance. Martha circled him like a drill sergeant, adjusting his grip, repositioning his feet, correcting the angle of his shoulders. The modifications felt awkward at first, but within an hour, Tyler was consistently hitting the center of the target board with his dry fire shots. "You do have a natural eye," Martha observed, watching him work through a series of trigger pulls. "Your hand-eye coordination is excellent, and you're not fighting the recoil anticipation that plagues most beginners." Recoil anticipation? The tendency to flinch or jerk the trigger because you're expecting the gun to kick. It's the most common reason people miss their targets. She demonstrated with her own weapon, showing him the difference between a smooth trigger pull and the jerky motion that sent shots wide. Most shooters spend years trying to overcome that reflex. You don't seem to have it. They worked until 6 o'clock, by which time Tyler's trigger finger was sore and his shooting arm ached from holding the heavy revolver. But his groupings had tightened considerably, and he was beginning to understand the difference between aiming and shooting. "Tomorrow we'll start with live ammunition," Martha said as they cleaned the weapons. "But we're going to start small. 22 caliber, low recoil, so you can focus on technique without worrying about the gun jumping in your hands." Tyler nodded, then hesitated. "Mrs. Henley, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you quit? I mean, if you were as good as you say you were, why walk away from all those championships?" Martha paused in her cleaning, considering the question. It was one she'd asked herself countless times over the years, especially during the long evenings after Robert's death, when the house felt too quiet and too empty. "I met someone," she said finally. "Robert was a good man, but he didn't understand the competitive shooting world. He thought it was dangerous, masculine, not something a proper wife should be involved in. It was a different time, Tyler. Women had fewer choices about these things. Do you regret it?" The question hung in the air between them. Martha finished cleaning her revolver before answering. "I regret that I felt I had to choose. But I don't regret the life I had with Robert. He was my partner for 49 years, and we had a good marriage. But now, she looked around the basement, at the targets and the cleaning supplies and the careful organization of their new training space. Now I'm wondering what Martha Pemberton might have accomplished if she'd never stopped shooting. Tuesday's session introduced Tyler to live ammunition, starting with a .22 caliber pistol that produced minimal recoil and a sharp crack that echoed through the basement. Martha had installed proper soundproofing years ago when Robert had used the space for woodworking, so they could practice without disturbing the neighbors. Tyler's first shot went wide, the unfamiliarity of actual recoil throwing off his carefully practiced technique. His second shot hit the target, but outside the scoring rings. By his 10th shot, he was consistently hitting the center of the target, his natural talent adapting quickly to the transition from dry fire to live rounds. "Remarkable," Martha murmured, watching him work through his second magazine. "Most people take weeks to achieve that level of consistency." "It feels different than I expected," Tyler said, ejecting the empty magazine and checking the chamber before setting the pistol down. "More precise, like the gun is just an extension of my hand." Martha nodded. "That's exactly what it should feel like. The weapon becomes part of you, not something you're fighting against." She picked up her own .22 and demonstrated, firing 5 shots in rapid succession that created a single ragged hole in the center of the target. When you reach that level of integration, shooting becomes almost meditative. They spent the rest of the week progressing through different calibers and techniques. Tyler proved to be an exceptionally fast learner, absorbing instruction with an intensity that reminded Martha of her own early days in competitive shooting. By Friday, he was shooting respectably with the .357 Magnum, though his groupings weren't quite tight enough for serious competition. "Ready for the real thing?" Martha asked as they cleaned their weapons after Friday's session. "You mean the shooting range?" "Riverside Shooting Range, Saturday morning, 9 o'clock. They have a beginner's tournament every weekend, $25 entry fee. Winner takes home $200. Tyler's eyes widened. $200 for shooting? "For shooting well," Martha corrected. "There's a difference. And Tyler, there's something you need to understand about tomorrow. People are going to know who I am. Or rather, who I was. There might be questions." "What kind of questions?" Martha sighed. "The kind that come when someone disappears from a tight-knit community for 23 years and then shows up with a teenage protege. The shooting world has a long memory, especially for people who walked away at the height of their careers." Saturday morning dawned clear and crisp, with the kind of autumn light that made everything look sharp and defined. Martha had barely slept, her mind cycling through scenarios and conversations she might have to navigate. She'd chosen her outfit. Carefully, practical pants and a button-down shirt that suggested competence without calling attention to herself. Tyler met her at the car at 8:30, wearing new jeans and a polo shirt that Martha suspected he'd bought specifically for the occasion. He carried a small duffel bag containing his practice ammunition and the notebook where he'd been recording his progress. "Nervous?" Martha asked as they drove toward the range. "Terrified," Tyler admitted. "What if I embarrass myself? What if I can't hit anything with all those people watching? Then you'll learn something valuable about performing under pressure, and you'll do better next time." Martha turned onto the gravel road that led to Riverside Shooting Range. "The first tournament is about experience, not winning. Though I have a feeling you might surprise yourself." The range looked exactly as Martha remembered it, a cluster of low concrete buildings surrounded by carefully maintained outdoor shooting lanes. The parking lot was already half full at 9 in the morning, pickup trucks and SUVs bearing gun racks and competitive shooting stickers. The sound of gunfire echoed from the practice ranges, a familiar percussion that made Martha's heart rate increase. "Mrs. Henley?" Tyler's voice was uncertain. Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Several ghosts, Martha murmured, then forced a smile. Come on, let's get you registered. The registration building buzzed with the pre-tournament energy Martha remembered from her competition days. Shooters checked their equipment, discussed strategy, and greeted old friends with the easy camaraderie of people who shared a passion. The smell of gun oil and coffee hung in the air, mixing with the autumn breeze that carried the sound of distant gunfire. Martha approached the registration desk where a middle-aged man with graying hair and weathered hands was checking names off a list. He looked up as she approached, and his expression shifted from professional courtesy to shock. Martha Pemberton, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'll be damned. Hello, Frank, Martha replied, her voice steadier than she felt. It's been a long time. Frank Morrison, no relation to Diane from the grocery store, had been the range master at Riverside for 30 years. He'd officiated at most of Martha's championship matches, and she'd always respected his fairness and attention to detail. 23 years, Frank said, standing up from behind the desk. 23 years since you walked away from the state. Championships. People still talk about that match, you know. The way you shot that perfect score in the final round, then packed up your gear and disappeared. I had my reasons, Martha said quietly. Frank's eyes shifted to Tyler, who was standing slightly behind Martha, trying to process the implications of what he was hearing. This is your grandson? This is Tyler Garrison. He's here for the beginners tournament. Frank's eyebrows rose. Pemberton's protege. Boy, you better be good. You've got some serious reputation to live up to. Tyler found his voice. I'm just here to learn, sir. We'll see about that. Frank turned back to Martha. You shooting today, too? Martha had been dreading this question. I'm just here to support Tyler. Come on, Martha. It's been 23 years. Don't you think it's time? Before Martha could respond, another voice cut through the conversation. Martha Pemberton. Well, I'll be damned. Martha turned to see a tall, lean man with silver hair and keen blue eyes approaching the registration desk. He moved with the careful precision of someone who'd spent decades handling firearms, and his face bore the weathered look of someone who'd spent considerable time outdoors. Hello, Jack, Martha said, her voice carefully neutral. Jack Hoffman had been Martha's biggest rival during her competitive years, a skilled shooter who'd finished second to her in more tournaments than either of them cared to remember. He'd also been the man who'd convinced her to walk away from competitive shooting, though the circumstances of that conversation were complicated enough to fill a book. 23 years, Jack said, echoing Frank's words. I heard you got married. Henley, wasn't it? That's right. Robert Henley. He passed away 4 years ago. Jack's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry for your loss. He was a good man. The acknowledgement surprised Martha. Jack had never met Robert, but word travels fast in small communities. Thank you. So what brings you back to the range? Besides the young man, I mean. Martha gestured toward Tyler. Tyler's interested in competitive shooting. I'm helping him get started. Jack studied Tyler with the assessing gaze of someone who'd spent decades evaluating talent. Are you any good, son? Tyler straightened his shoulders. I'm learning, sir. We'll see. Jack turned back to Martha. You know, there's an exhibition match after the regular tournament. Masters Division. Winner takes home $500. He paused, letting the number sink in. Course, it's been so long since you shot competitively, you might not be interested. The challenge hung in the air between them. Martha could feel Tyler's eyes on her, could sense the attention of other shooters who'd overheard the conversation. The old familiar fire began to burn in her chest, the competitive instinct that had driven her to 12 state championships. I'll think about it, she said finally. Jack smiled. I'll hold a spot for you just in case. The beginners tournament consisted of 24 shooters divided into 3 groups of 8. Tyler was assigned to the second group, which gave him time to observe the first group and get a feel for the competition format. Martha found a spot in the observation area where she could watch without drawing too much attention to herself. The first group included mostly teenagers and young adults, with a few older shooters who were new to competitive shooting. The format was straightforward. 5 shots at 25 yards, best grouping wins. Simple in concept, but Martha knew that the pressure of competition could make even experienced shooters struggle. Tyler watched the first group with the intensity of someone studying for a final exam. He took notes on technique, stance, and the way different shooters handled the pressure of being observed. When his turn came, he walked to the shooting line with the careful composure Martha had been teaching him. "Shooters, load and make ready," Frank announced from the range master's position. Tyler loaded his .357 with the 5 rounds Martha had prepared for him, each one carefully selected for consistency and accuracy. His hands were steady as he took his shooting stance, feet positioned exactly as they'd practiced, grip firm, but not tense. "Shooters ready? The line is hot." Tyler raised his revolver, aligned his sights, and began the breathing pattern Martha had taught him. The first shot came as a surprise, not to Tyler, but to the other shooters who'd expected a beginner to struggle with the heavy recoil of the .357. The shot hit the dead center of the target. His second shot landed less than an inch from the first. The third shot opened up the group slightly, but still within the scoring rings. The fourth shot brought the group back to center, and the fifth shot created a ragged hole that drew appreciative murmurs from the other shooters. "Not bad for a beginner," someone said behind Martha. "That's no beginner," another voice replied. "Look at that stance. Someone's been training him." Martha felt a flush of pride mixed with concern. Tyler had shot better than she'd expected, but his performance was drawing the kind of attention that might make people ask uncomfortable questions about his training. When the scores were posted, Tyler had won the beginners tournament by a margin of 12 points. He walked back to where Martha was waiting, his face flushed with excitement and disbelief. "I won," he said, as if he couldn't quite believe it. "I actually won." "You shot well," Martha agreed, accepting the congratulations of nearby shooters. "Better than I expected, actually." Frank Morrison appeared beside them, carrying a small trophy and an envelope. "Tyler Garrison, first place in the beginners division. $200 prize money." Tyler accepted the trophy and envelope with shaking hands. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me, son. Thank your coach." Frank looked at Martha. That was some fine shooting for someone who's supposedly just learning. "He's a natural," Martha said, deflecting the implicit question. "I can see that." "The question is, where did he learn to shoot like that?" Frank's gaze was steady, professional, because that wasn't beginner's luck. That was muscle memory. Before Martha could respond, Jack Hoffman appeared at her elbow. "Impressive protege, Martha. Makes me wonder what kind of shooting you're doing these days." "Just teaching," Martha said carefully. "Well, the exhibition match starts in 30 minutes. $500 to the winner." Jack's smile was friendly but competitive. "Might be interesting to see how much you remember." Martha looked at Tyler, who was still staring at his trophy with wonder. $200 was more money than he'd seen in months, enough to cover another month of his mother's medications. But $500 would provide a cushion, a small buffer against the medical expenses that kept mounting. "What do you think?" she asked Tyler quietly. Tyler looked up at her, his eyes bright with excitement and something else, complete faith in her abilities. "I think Martha Pemberton should show these people what she can do." The words hit Martha like a physical blow. For the first time in 23 years, someone was calling her by her competition name, acknowledging the part of herself she'd buried when she'd chosen domestic life over competitive shooting. "All right," she said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "I'll shoot." Jack's smile widened. Excellent. Just like old times. As Martha walked toward the registration desk to sign up for the exhibition match, she could feel the weight of 23 years of dormant competitive instinct stirring to life. The question wasn't whether she remembered how to shoot. Muscle memory that deeply ingrained never truly disappeared. The question was whether she could still handle the pressure of competition, the scrutiny of people who remembered Martha Pemberton at her peak. In 30 minutes, she would find out. The exhibition match drew a crowd that surprised even Frank Morrison. Word had spread quickly through the range that Martha Pemberton was back, and shooters from the morning tournaments lingered to watch. Others arrived specifically for the exhibition, veterans of the competitive circuit who remembered the legend and wanted to see if 23 years had dulled her edge. Martha stood at the equipment table, methodically checking her .357 Magnum, with the same ritual she'd performed hundreds of times before. Each cylinder was examined, each cartridge inspected for flaws, the weapon's balance tested with practiced hands. The familiar routine calmed her nerves and transported her back to the mindset that had once made her nearly unbeatable. Nervous? Tyler asked, standing beside her as unofficial coach and moral support. Terrified, Martha admitted, echoing his words from that morning. It's been a long time since I've shot with this many people watching. The exhibition format was different from the beginner's tournament Tyler had won. 5 shooters, each firing 10 rounds at 50 yards, with scoring based on both accuracy and consistency. The targets were smaller, the distance greater, and the pressure exponentially higher. Martha knew that half the crowd was hoping to see the return of a champion, while the other half was waiting to watch a has-been embarrass herself. Jack Hoffman was stretching near the shooting line, going through his own pre-competition routine. At 68, he remained one of the most respected shooters in the region, with reflexes and eyesight that defied his age. Beside him stood Carol Brennan, a 50-something competitor who dominated women's divisions for the past decade. And 2 younger men Martha didn't recognize but who carried themselves with the confidence of serious competitors. Ladies and gentlemen, Frank announced through the range's public address system, we have a special exhibition match this afternoon. 5 shooters, 10 rounds, each at 50 yards. Let me introduce our competitors. He went through the list methodically. Carol Brennan, 3-time regional champion. David Chun, current state record holder in the precision division. Mike Rodriguez, rising star from the Philadelphia shooting circuit. Jack Hoffman, veteran competitor with more than 40 years of tournament experience. And finally, Frank paused for dramatic effect, making her return to competitive shooting. After 23 years, 12-time state champion Martha Pemberton. The applause was polite, but reserved. Most of the younger shooters had never heard of Martha Pemberton, while the veterans remembered her reputation, but wondered if she could live up to it after such a long absence. Martha acknowledged the crowd with a slight nod, her attention already focused on the target's downrange. Shooters, take your positions. Martha walked to lane 3, the same position she'd preferred during her competitive years. The concrete beneath her feet felt solid and familiar, the slight breeze from the left requiring compensation, she calculated automatically. She loaded 10 rounds into her revolver cylinder, each movement deliberate and practiced. Load and make. Ready. The range fell silent except for the mechanical sounds of weapons being prepared. Martha's breathing slowed, her heart rate settling into the steady rhythm she'd trained herself to maintain under pressure. The crowd, the other competitors, even Tyler, everything faded except the target 50 yards downrange. Shooters ready? The line is hot. Martha raised her revolver, aligned her sights, and felt 23 years disappear in an instant. The weapon felt like an extension of her body, the target clear and sharp through her sights. She began the breathing pattern that had become as natural as walking, letting her body settle into the stance that had won her 12 state Championships. Her first shot broke the morning silence like thunder. The recoil rolled through her arms and shoulders, exactly as she remembered. The .357 bucking slightly before settling back on target. Downrange, the spotting scope confirmed what she already knew, dead center of the bullseye. The second shot followed 5 seconds later, landing less than half an inch from the first. Around her, she could hear the other competitors firing their own strings, but their shots seemed distant and unimportant. Martha's world had narrowed to the simple geometry of sight alignment and trigger control. By her fifth shot, a pattern had emerged that drew murmurs from the crowd. Martha wasn't just hitting the center of the target. She was creating a single ragged hole that suggested mechanical precision rather than human marksmanship. The kind of shooting that had made her legendary in competitive circles. Jack Hoffman fired his final shot and stepped back from the line, his expression thoughtful as he watched Martha continue her string. He'd been shooting competitively for 4 decades, had seen thousands of marksmen, but Martha's performance was triggering memories of matches where he'd finished second despite shooting the best rounds of his life. Martha's 8th shot opened the group slightly, a microscopic flaw in her technique that would have been unnoticeable to casual observers, but made her grimace internally. She adjusted her grip fractionally, settled her breathing, and fired her 9th shot back into the center of the growing hole. The final shot was the one that mattered most. In competitive shooting, the last round often determined the difference between victory and defeat, the moment when pressure and fatigue conspired to break down even experienced shooters. Martha had built her reputation on her ability to deliver under exactly these circumstances. She held her sight picture for an extra second, feeling the trigger's resistance, waiting for the perfect moment when breathing, heartbeat, and muscle tension aligned. The shot surprised even her with its clarity, the trigger breaking like glass, the recoil rolling through her body in perfect harmony. Cease fire. All shooters stepped back from the line. Martha lowered her revolver and opened the cylinder, ejecting the empty brass with practiced efficiency. Only then did she allow herself to look at the crowd, where the silence had been replaced by animated conversation and the kind of excited energy that followed exceptional performances. Frank Morrison was already halfway to the targets with his spotting scope, but even from 50 yards, the results were visible to everyone on the range. While the other competitors had shot respectable groups scattered across the scoring rings, Martha's target showed what appeared to be a single hole, surrounded by the faintest traces of additional bullet impacts. Unofficial spotting, Frank announced as he examined each target. Chun, 86 points. Rodriguez, 89 points. Brennan, 92 points. Huffman, 95 points. He paused at Martha's target, spending extra time with his measuring tools. Pemberton, 99 points out of a possible 100. The crowd erupted. 99 points was the kind of score that won national championships, the result of shooting so precise that only the most sophisticated measuring equipment could detect any variance from perfect accuracy. It was also exactly the kind of performance that had made Martha Pemberton a legend 23 years ago. Tyler rushed to Martha's side, his face flushed with excitement and pride. "That was incredible. I've never seen anything like that." Martha accepted the congratulations of the other competitors with the same quiet grace she'd shown throughout the match. Jack Hoffman approached her with a slight smile and an extended hand. "Welcome back, Martha," he said simply. "Some things never change." "Some things shouldn't," Martha replied, shaking his hand. Carol Brennan was next, her expression mixing admiration with professional curiosity. "That was a beautiful shooting. I'd heard the stories, but seeing it in person, double quotes, she shook her head. Any chance you're thinking about returning to serious competition?" Martha glanced at Tyler, who was still staring at her target with wonder. "I'm focused on teaching right now. But who knows what the future holds?" Frank Morrison appeared with the prize money and a small trophy that seemed almost inadequate for the performance they'd just witnessed. $500, Martha, earned fair and square. Martha accepted the envelope but handed it immediately to Tyler. This belongs to you. Your mother's medicine is more important than my ego. Tyler's eyes widened. I can't take that. You earned it. We earned it, Martha corrected. And this is what we earned it for. The crowd began to disperse, but several shooters lingered to talk with Martha about technique, to share memories of her competitive years, or simply to be in the VIP presence of someone who just demonstrated shooting at its highest level. Martha handled the attention with practiced ease, answering questions and accepting compliments while part of her mind processed what had just happened. She'd returned to competitive shooting after 23 years and hadn't just held her own. She'd dominated. The muscle memory was intact, the mental discipline undiminished, and most importantly, the passion for precision that had driven her original success was still burning bright. Mrs. Henley? Tyler's voice was uncertain. Can I ask you something? They were driving home, the trophy and prize money secured in Tyler's lap, the afternoon's events still fresh in both their minds. Of course. Why did you really quit? I mean, after shooting like that, how could you walk away? Martha was quiet for several miles, watching the familiar landscape of Millbrook pass by her window. The question deserved an honest answer, but the truth was more complicated than she'd ever admitted to anyone, including herself. I was 26. When I met Robert, she said finally. He was a good man, steady and kind, but he came from a world where women didn't compete in shooting sports. Being a wife and mother was considered more important than winning championships, but you were so good at it. I was. And that scared him, I think. He couldn't understand why I needed that level of competition, that intensity. He saw it as dangerous, unfeminine. So I had to choose. Tyler was quiet for a moment. Do you regret the choice? Martha pulled into her driveway and sat in the car for a moment before answering. I regret that I felt I had to choose at all, but I don't regret the life I had with Robert. We were happy together, Tyler. Really happy. It's just ... double quotes, she paused. It's just that today reminded me of who I used to be, and maybe who I still am. That evening, Tyler called his mother to tell her about the tournament and the prize money. Martha could hear Linda Garrison's voice through the phone, weak but joyful, expressing gratitude that brought tears to Tyler's eyes. $700 would cover her medications for more than 2 months, providing a breathing space they hadn't had since her diagnosis. But as Martha watched Tyler talk to his mother, she realized that the day's events had changed more than just their financial situation. For the first time in 23 years, she felt fully alive, completely herself. Martha Pemberton wasn't just a memory anymore. She was a living, breathing part of who Martha Henley had always been. The question now was what to do with that knowledge, and whether a 73-year-old woman could reclaim a championship career she'd abandoned in her prime. Word of Martha's performance spread through the regional shooting community faster than wildfire. By Monday morning, her phone was ringing with calls from competitors, range masters, and even a reporter from Pennsylvania Gun Sports magazine who wanted to interview the legendary marksman who'd returned from retirement. Martha politely declined most of the requests, but she couldn't ignore the call from Sandra Walsh, director of the Mid-Atlantic Precision Shooting Championship. The MAPSC was the region's premier competition, drawing top shooters from 5 states and offering prize money that could change lives. Martha, I know this is short notice, Sandra said, her voice crackling through the phone line, but we've had a last-minute cancellation in next weekend's championship. One of our confirmed shooters broke his wrist in a motorcycle accident. I'd love to offer you his spot. Martha felt her heart skip. The Mid-Atlantic Championship was the competition she'd always dreamed of winning during her active years, but family obligations and Robert's disapproval had prevented her from ever entering. The prize money was substantial, $5,000. To the winner, with smaller amounts for the top 10 finishers. I appreciate the offer, Sandra, but I'm really just focused on helping my student right now. I understand, but Martha, what you did on Saturday was remarkable. The shooting community is buzzing about it. And frankly, we could use the publicity. Interest in precision shooting has been declining, especially among younger demographics. Having Martha Pemberton return to championship competition could be exactly what the sport needs. After ending the call, Martha sat in her kitchen staring at her coffee cup, mind racing through possibilities and complications. $5,000 would cover Tyler's mother's medical expenses for months, possibly even fund experimental treatments their insurance wouldn't cover. But returning to championship-level competition meant facing scrutiny she wasn't sure she was ready for. Tyler arrived for his afternoon training session to find Martha distracted and unfocused. She'd set up their usual basement routine, but her instruction lacked its typical precision. "What's wrong?" Tyler asked after missing several shots in a row. "You seem like you're somewhere else." Martha told him about Sandra's call and the opportunity it represented. Tyler listened intently, his expression growing more excited as she explained the significance of the Mid-Atlantic Championship. "You have to do it," he said immediately. $5,000? That could pay for everything. Mom's medicines. Maybe even get her into that clinical trial in Pittsburgh. "It's not that simple, Tyler. I haven't shot in a championship match in over 2 decades. The competition will be fierce, and I'll be competing against people who've been active the entire time I was away." "But you shot 99 points on Saturday. Against good shooters. Local good shooters. The Mid-Atlantic draws competitors from across the region. Former Olympians, current national record holders, people who train full-time." Martha shook her head. "I'd be walking into an arena where I haven't fought in 23 years. Tyler was quiet for a moment, then looked up at her with the earnest intensity that reminded her why she decided to help him in the first place. "When I walked into that grocery store with a broken gun, I was desperate and scared and had no idea what I was doing. But you saw something in me worth saving. Maybe it's time someone returned the favor." The conversation stayed with Martha through the evening and into the next day. She found herself pulling out old shooting magazines, reading about current competitors and analyzing their techniques. Part of her mind was already calculating training schedules and equipment requirements, falling back into the analytical approach that had made her successful decades ago. Wednesday brought an unexpected visitor. Martha was tending her small garden when she heard a car pull into her driveway. She looked up to see Jack Hoffman climbing out of a silver pickup truck, moving with the careful precision of someone whose joints reminded him daily of his age. "Jack," she said, straightening up and brushing soil from her hands. "This is a surprise. Hope you don't mind me dropping by unannounced. I heard about Sandra Walsh's call." Martha wasn't surprised that word had traveled so quickly. The competitive shooting community was small and tightly knit, with gossip moving as fast as ballistics data. News travels fast. It does, and there's something you should know before you make your decision. Jack's expression was serious. "Brad Patterson is shooting in the Mid-Atlantic this year." The name hit Martha like a physical blow. Brad Patterson had been her primary rival during the final years of her competitive career, a talented but arrogant shooter who'd resented Martha's success and hadn't been shy about expressing his opinions regarding women in competitive shooting. "I see," Martha said carefully. "He's been talking, Martha. Word is he's been telling people that your performance on Saturday was a fluke, that 23 years away from competition means you've lost your edge. He's been questioning whether you ever deserved those state championships in the first place." Martha felt the familiar fire building in her chest, the competitive anger that had fueled some of her best performances. "Has he now?" "He's also been suggesting that your protégé's victory in the beginners tournament was somehow orchestrated. Maybe the competition wasn't as fair as it appeared. This second revelation struck even deeper. Questioning Martha's abilities was one thing, but casting doubt on Tyler's legitimate victory crossed a line that made her hands clenched into fists. That's a serious accusation. It is, and it's complete nonsense, of course. I watched that kid shoot. He's got natural talent you can't fake. Jack studied Martha's face. But Patterson's got influence in the shooting community. If he keeps talking, it could damage both of your reputations. Martha was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. She'd walked away from competitive shooting, partly to avoid exactly this kind of drama, the politics and personality conflicts that could overshadow the pure sport of precision marksmanship. There's something else, Jack continued. Patterson's been the favorite to win the Mid-Atlantic for 3 years running. He's placed second twice, and he's hungry for that championship. But if Martha Pemberton shows up, he smiled slightly. Well, let's just say it would change the dynamics considerably. You think I should enter? I think you should do whatever feels right. But I also think that sometimes the best way to silence doubters is to let your shooting do the talking. After Jack left, Martha spent the afternoon walking through Millbrook's quiet neighborhoods, thinking about choices and consequences. She'd built a good life here, a peaceful existence that didn't require proving anything to anyone. But Tyler's situation, combined with Patterson's accusations, had created circumstances that demanded a response. That evening, she called Tyler to discuss the situation. His reaction was immediate and passionate. He said, "What about my tournament?" "Win?" Tyler's voice carried genuine hurt. "I earned that victory. You taught me well, but I was the one who had to perform under pressure." "I know you did, Tyler. Everyone who watched knows what you did. Then we have to prove it. Both of us. You have to enter that championship and show Patterson and everyone else exactly what Martha Pemberton can do." Martha smiled at his fierce loyalty. "And what about your training? If I'm focusing on my own preparation, I won't have as much time to work with you. Then we'll train together. I'll push you, you'll push me. Besides," Tyler's voice took on a mischievous tone, "wouldn't it be something if both the teacher and student showed up at that range and dominated?" The idea had merit. Tyler had already proven himself in local competition, and his rapid improvement suggested he might be ready for more challenging tournaments. Training together would benefit both of them, and having Tyler there would provide moral support during what promised to be an intense competition. "You're serious about competing in higher-level tournaments?" "Dead serious. Mom's doing better thanks to the medicine we can afford now. But the doctors say she needs more aggressive treatment, the kind that costs real money. If I can start winning larger tournaments... Martha understood. Tyler's competitive shooting career wasn't just about sport or personal achievement. It was about survival. About providing for his mother's medical needs in a system that seemed designed to bankrupt families facing serious illness. "All right," she said, surprising herself with the decision. "I'll call Sandra Walsh tomorrow and accept her invitation." "But Tyler, if we're doing this, we're doing it right. No half measures, no casual preparation. Championship-level competition requires championship-level commitment, whatever it takes." "Whatever it takes," Martha agreed. Thursday morning found Martha on the phone with Sandra Walsh, officially entering the Mid-Atlantic Precision Shooting Championship. The entry fee was substantial, $500, but Tyler insisted on paying half from his tournament winnings, treating it as an investment in their shared future. The news of Martha's entry spread through the competitive shooting community within hours. By afternoon, Martha was fielding calls from old friends expressing excitement, competitors offering encouragement, and reporters seeking interviews about her return to championship shooting. One call stood out from the rest. It came just before dinner from a number Martha didn't recognize. "Martha Pemberton?" The voice was familiar, though she hadn't heard it in 23 years. This is Martha Henley. Right, of course. Married name. This is Brad Patterson. I heard you're planning to compete in the Mid-Atlantic Championship. Martha's grip tightened. On the phone, that's correct. Well, I just wanted to call and welcome you back to competitive shooting. It'll be interesting to see how you perform against current level competition. The sport has evolved considerably since you were active. The condescension in his voice was subtle but unmistakable, the same tone he'd used 23 years ago. When he'd questioned whether women belonged in competitive shooting at all. I'm sure it has, Martha replied evenly. Of course, local exhibitions are one thing, but championship competition is entirely different. The pressure, the level of talent, the mental demands, it's not something you can just walk back into after 2 decades away. I suppose we'll find out, Patterson chuckled. Indeed we will. I look forward to seeing what Martha Pemberton can do when the stakes are real. After ending the call, Martha sat quietly in her kitchen, feeling the competitive fire burning brighter than it had in decades. Patterson's arrogance hadn't changed, but neither had her determination to prove him wrong. The Mid-Atlantic Championship was 6 days away, and Martha Pemberton was ready to remind the shooting world exactly why she'd been legendary the first time around. The Mid-Atlantic Precision Shooting Championship was held at Lancaster Valley Range, a sprawling complex that hosted some of the most prestigious competitions on the East Coast. Martha and Tyler arrived 2 hours before the competition began, giving them time to familiarize themselves with the facility and complete their equipment checks. The parking lot told the story of serious competition. Vehicles from Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, New Jersey, and Delaware, many bearing shooting club decals and sponsor stickers. Martha recognized license plates from ranges she'd competed at decades ago, while others represented facilities that had been built long after her retirement. This is different from Riverside, Tyler observed, taking in the modern concrete buildings and sophisticated electronic scoring systems. Everything's different at the championship level, Martha replied, checking her equipment bag one final time. The facilities, the competitors, the pressure. Are you ready for this? Tyler had qualified for the intermediate division based on his beginner's tournament victory, a category that included shooters with up to 3 years of competitive experience. The field wasn't as elite as Martha's Masters division, but it included several regional champions and rising stars who'd been training seriously for years. I'm ready, Tyler said, though his voice carried the nervous energy of someone facing their biggest test yet. Inside the registration building, Martha immediately spotted familiar faces mixed with new ones. Jack Hoffman was talking with a group of veteran competitors near the coffee station, while Carol Brennan reviewed her equipment list at a nearby table. But it was the man holding court near the main bulletin board who drew Martha's attention. Brad Patterson looked older but still carried himself with the same arrogant confidence that had grated on her nerves 23 years ago. His hair had gone completely gray, and his face showed the weathering of 6 decades, but his voice was as loud and opinionated as ever. The sport's changed dramatically since the old days, he was telling a group of younger competitors. Today's shooters are more scientific, more dedicated. We've moved beyond the era when natural talent alone could carry someone to championships. Martha approached the registration desk, where Sandra Walsh greeted her with genuine enthusiasm. Martha, I'm so glad you decided to compete. Your entry has generated more media interest than we've had in years. Sandra handed her a competitor packet and range pass. Lane 12 for the Masters Division. First round starts at 10 o'clock. Thank you for the opportunity, Sandra. The opportunity is all ours. Having Martha Pemberton back in championship competition is exactly what the sport needs. As Martha reviewed her lane assignment and match schedule, she became aware of conversations quieting around her. Word of her presence was spreading through the building, drawing curious looks from competitors. who'd heard the stories but never seen the legend in person. Tyler completed his own registration and joined Martha at a quiet table where they could review the competition format. The championship consisted of 3 rounds: precision shooting at 50 yards, rapid fire at 25 yards, and a final challenge round that varied each year. This year's challenge round would be announced after the first 2 rounds were completed. "Remember what we practiced," Martha said quietly. "Don't let the crowd distract you. Don't worry about what other shooters are doing. Focus on your fundamentals. Trust your training and let the shots happen naturally." Tyler nodded, but Martha could see the tension in his shoulders. This was an enormous step up from local competitions, and the weight of representing Martha's teaching was clearly affecting him. "Tyler," she said, placing a hand on his arm, "you belong here. You've earned this spot through your own skill and dedication. Whatever happens today, I'm proud of what you've accomplished." The first round began with the intermediate division, giving Martha a chance to watch Tyler compete while preparing for her own round. She found a position in the observation area where she could see his lane clearly. Tyler's first string of shots was tentative, his grouping adequate but not exceptional. Martha could see him fighting nerves, his stance slightly off from their practiced routine. But as the round progressed, his natural talent began to assert itself. His final 5 shots created a tight cluster in the center of the target that drew appreciative comments from nearby observers. When the scores were posted, Tyler had placed 7th out of 24 competitors, a respectable showing for someone in his first major competition, but not the dominant performance he'd hoped for. "I choked," he said when Martha met him after the round. "I let the pressure get to me." "You learned," Martha corrected. "That's what first championships are for. How do you feel now?" Tyler considered the question. "The better, more settled. Like I know what to expect now." "Good. Use that for the next round." The Masters division took the line 30 minutes later, and Martha felt the familiar pre-competition focus settling over her mind. The crowd was larger for this round, word having spread that Martha Pemberton was competing for the first time in over 2 decades. She loaded her .357 Magnum with the precision of a surgeon, each cartridge carefully selected and seated. The familiar weight of the weapon in her hands transported her back to countless competitions, the muscle memory of excellence awakening after its long dormancy. "Shooters, take your positions." Martha stepped up to lane 12, immediately aware of Brad Patterson 2 lanes to her right. He was going through his own pre-competition routine, but she caught him glancing in her direction with barely concealed skepticism. "Load and make ready." The range fell silent except for the mechanical sounds of weapons being prepared. Martha's breathing slowed to the steady rhythm that had carried her through dozens of championships, her heart rate settling into the zone where precision became possible. "Shooters ready?" The line is hot. Martha's first shot was perfect, not just accurate, but mechanically precise in a way that reminded her why she dominated this sport. The recoil rolled through her arms exactly as she remembered, the weapon settling back on target with minimal movement. Her second shot landed within millimeters of the first, beginning a pattern that drew murmurs from the observation area. By her 5th shot, Martha had created what appeared to be a single hole in the center of the target, a grouping so tight that individual bullet impacts were indistinguishable. Around her, the other competitors were shooting well. This was championship level competition, after all, but Martha's performance was operating on a different plane entirely. Each shot seemed to flow naturally from the last, precision building upon precision in a display of marksmanship that reminded everyone present why legends became legendary. Patterson's shots were accurate but scattered across the scoring rings. Professional-level shooting that would have been impressive in any other context. But compared to Martha's surgical precision, his grouping looked almost casual. Martha's final shot of the round was the kind that defined careers. holding her sight picture for an extra heartbeat, feeling the perfect moment when breathing, heartbeat, and muscle tension aligned. She broke the shot with crystalline clarity. The bullet punched through the exact center of her growing group, creating a ragged hole that would require sophisticated measuring equipment to score accurately. Cease. Fire. All shooters stepped back from the line. The range erupted in applause as the targets were retrieved for scoring. Even from 50 yards, Martha's target was visibly superior to every other competitor's, a demonstration of precision that belonged in textbooks rather than competitions. Unofficial scoring for round 1, the range master announced. Patterson, 94 points. Hoffman, 96 points. Chun, 97 points. Pemberton, 100 points. A perfect score. Martha had returned to championship competition after 23 years and shot a perfect round against the best competitors in the region. The applause was thunderous, but Martha barely heard it. She was already focused on the next round, the rapid-fire portion that would test different skills entirely. The second round required 5 shots in 8 seconds at 25 yards, emphasizing speed and control over pure precision. It was a discipline that favored younger shooters with faster reflexes, and Martha knew her age might show here. Tyler's second round was dramatically improved. The nerves were gone, replaced by the focused intensity Martha had trained into him. His rapid fire string was clean and controlled, resulting in a grouping that placed him 3rd overall in the intermediate division, a remarkable improvement that put him in contention for a podium finish. "That's the Tyler I've been training," Martha said with satisfaction. "Now you know what you're capable of when you trust your preparation." The Masters Division Rapid Fire Round showcased the depth of talent in championship competition. These were shooters who'd been practicing rapid fire techniques for decades, and their speed was impressive. But speed without accuracy was worthless. And Martha's years of disciplined practice showed in her ability to maintain precision while increasing her firing rate. Her 8-second string produced 5 shots clustered in the center of the target. Not quite as tight as her precision round, but accurate enough to maintain her lead. Patterson's rapid fire was faster but less controlled. His shots scattered across a wider area that cost him valuable points. After 2 rounds, Martha led the Masters Division by 4 points, with Patterson in 2nd place and Jack Hoffman close behind in 3rd. In the intermediate division, Tyler had climbed to 2nd place overall, putting him in position for a significant prize money finish. Then Sandra Walsh took the microphone to announce the challenge round. "Ladies and gentlemen, this year's championship challenge round will test both precision and nerves. Each competitor will attempt to split a quarter placed on a wooden stand at 25 yards. 1 shot only. Miss the quarter entirely, and you score 0 points. Hit the quarter but fail to split it, you score 50 points. Split the quarter cleanly in half, you score 100 points. The crowd buzzed with excitement. Coin splitting was a legendary shooting feat, the kind of demonstration that separated true masters from merely excellent marksmen. It required not just precision, but perfect timing and absolute confidence. Martha felt a chill of recognition. This was the exact challenge that had established her reputation 23 years ago. The feat that had made Martha Pemberton a legend in competitive shooting circles. The irony wasn't lost on her, or on anyone else who remembered her competitive career. "Intermediate division shoots first," Sandra announced. "Tyler Garrison, you're up." Tyler approached the shooting line with the same calm focus he'd shown in the second round. The quarter gleamed on its wooden stand 25 yards away, a tiny target that seemed almost impossible to hit, let alone split. Martha watched from the observation area, her hands clenched with nervous energy. This was a shot that could define Tyler's competitive career, the moment that would either establish him as a serious competitor or remind him that championship shooting demanded more than talent alone. Tyler loaded a single round into his revolver and took his shooting stance. The range fell completely silent, hundreds of people holding their breath as he aligned his sights on the distant quarter. The shot when it came was clean and sharp. The quarter spun off its stand, and for a moment, the result was unclear. Then the spotting scope confirmed what Tyler's instincts had told him. The quarter lay in two perfect halves on the ground behind the stand. The crowd erupted. Tyler had split the quarter on his first attempt in his first championship competition, a feat that many veteran shooters had never accomplished. His score for the challenge round put him in first place overall in the intermediate division, guaranteeing him substantial prize money and establishing his reputation as a rising star. "Beginner's luck," Brad Patterson muttered from nearby, but his voice lacked conviction. What Tyler had just accomplished required skill, not luck. The Masters Division Challenge round began with the lowest-ranked competitors and worked upward. Martha would shoot last as the round leader, meaning she'd know exactly what score she needed to secure victory. Jack Hoffman stepped up first among the serious contenders. His shot clipped the edge of the quarter, sending it spinning but intact. 50 points. Carol Brennan, competing in the Women's Masters Division, missed the quarter entirely, her shot sailing just high of the target. Patterson approached the line with his characteristic swagger, making a show of examining his ammunition and adjusting his stance. The crowd watched expectantly as he raised his revolver and aligned his sights. His shot was accurate, striking the quarter dead center. But instead of splitting cleanly, the coin crumpled around the bullet, folding rather than separating. The judges deliberated before awarding him 50 points for hitting the target without achieving a clean split. Patterson's face darkened as he realized his score. 50 points left him vulnerable to any competitor who could achieve a clean split. And everyone present knew that Martha Pemberton had built her reputation on exactly this type of shot. "Martha Pemberton, you're up for the championship challenge round." Martha walked to the shooting line amid complete silence. The quarter gleamed on its stand 25 yards away, no different from the hundreds of similar targets she'd engaged during her competitive career. But the weight of expectation, the presence of Tyler in the crowd, and the memory of all the years she'd spent away from this moment made this shot feel uniquely significant. She loaded a single round into her .357 Magnum and closed the cylinder. With the quiet click that had preceded so many perfect shots, the familiar weight of the weapon settled into her hands like a reunion with an old friend. The crowd, the other competitors, even Tyler, everything faded until only Martha and the quarter existed in the universe. She raised her revolver, aligned her sights with mechanical precision, and settled into the breathing pattern that had never failed her. The shot when it came was inevitable, the culmination of 50 years of shooting experience and 23 years of waiting for redemption. The .357 roared. The quarter spun off its stand, and two perfect halves fell to the ground with the musical chime of split metal. The silence lasted for 3 heartbeats before the crowd exploded in applause. Martha had returned to championship competition after more than 2 decades, and won with a performance that reminded everyone present why legends become legendary. But as Martha accepted congratulations and prize money, her thoughts were with Tyler, who had finished first in his division and proven that talent, properly nurtured, could achieve remarkable things. The $5,000 she'd won would help Linda Garrison's medical bills, but Tyler's victory had established him as a competitor who could earn significant money for years to come. "So," Jack Hoffman said, approaching Martha with a smile, "any thoughts about returning to full-time competition?" Martha looked across the range where Tyler was being interviewed by the shooting sports reporter, his face glowing with pride and accomplishment. "I think I'm exactly where I need to be," she said, "teaching the next generation to split quarters and chase championships." The drive home was quiet, both Martha and Tyler processing what they'd accomplished. Tyler's first-place finish in the Intermediate division had earned him $1,500 and an invitation to compete in the National Precision Shooting Championship. Martha's victory had not only provided substantial prize money, but had definitively answered the questions about whether Martha Pemberton still existed. "What happens now?" Tyler asked as they pulled into Martha's driveway. "Now you decide what you want to do with this talent," Martha replied. "You've got options: military service, competitive shooting career, or both. But you've proven you can compete at the highest levels. And what about you? Are you going to keep competing?" Martha smiled, feeling more at peace than she had in years. "I think Martha Pemberton and Martha Henley have finally figured out how to coexist. We'll see what adventures that leads to." As they unloaded their equipment from the car, Martha reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A desperate teenager with a broken gun had led her back to a part of herself she'd thought was lost forever. In teaching Tyler to shoot, she'd rediscovered her own passion for precision and competition. The brass casing from her championship-winning shot was still in her pocket, a small piece of metal that represented the intersection of past and future, of Martha Pemberton's legacy and Martha Henley's continuing story. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight, she was simply a teacher who'd helped her student achieve something remarkable and a competitor who'd proven that some skills transcend time itself. The mockery was over. The legend was back. And Martha Henley was exactly who she was meant to be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.